Hi everyone, Jessica here and welcome back to my channel. So for today's video we're going to be taking a look at the newest issue of Simply Cards and Papercraft. This is issue 205 and the set of free gifts that you get with it is called Totally Tropical. So the free gifts included in this month's magazine, you get a 7x5" embossing folder and then you get a stamp set with 2 coordinating dies. So as always, let's take a look at the magazine itself. So near the start, you have a section where they give you some inspiration on what you can do with the free gifts with this magazine. As you can see, you've got different types of cards. You've got box cards, normal cards, sort of different sort of styles of cards that you can have a go at making yourself. And of course, then you've got lots of other inspiration further on in the magazine. So there is another section with more inspiration of what you can do with this set, as you can see here. And you can see I've got a little post-it note for sort of some inspiration that I'm going to take from that particular card. And then it's got the instructions, it's got the sort of list of items that they've used to create those projects. So you could follow those if you wanted to. So let's take a closer look at the products that you get free. So like I said, this is a 7x5" embossing folder, and I really like the fact that they give you a big embossing folder. So you can create sort of lots of different sized projects. You could create a square background with this embossing folder. You could obviously cut it down to make smaller cards, but I think a 7x5 is a really fantastic size. I really love the design that they've picked for this embossing folder. I think it goes that tropical theme really well. So next we've got a 13-piece stamp set and die. So you've got 2 dies, one for the hibiscus and one for the leaf. So we'll definitely be making use of that in today's cards. So normally what I do is just kind of make my own cards up. I don't really look at the inspiration that's in the magazine, but for this video I'm going to sort of have a look at some of the cards that they have designed and see what elements I can take from that and create my own cards. So one of the first ideas that popped into my head when I seen the big sort of solid leaf stamp was to create sort of like a band on my card. So looking at this particular card here, they sort of used it to do a really nice border around that flamingo. So I really am going to sort of use that idea, like I said, to create sort of a border. We're going to mask off the rest of it, stamp inside it, and that's going to be sort of a nice little bit of a background for my first card. I also really love the way that this bottom card, they've bunched those flowers together with some of the leaves. So I definitely think that I'll colour in some of those and then use the dies that come with this set to cut them out. So let's go ahead and get started with our first card. So I've got a 7x5" just plain piece of cardstock, and I'm just going to sort of mask and create a banner going across the centre of this card. And I'm going to be stamping this sort of big, I think it's like a palm leaf, because it is a really big solid stamp. It means that I don't have to colour it in and I can use some of my coloured ink pads. So I'm just going to do a quick little test just to see how the stamp comes out, just on a piece of scrap paper. And I'm going to see whether I want to either use an acrylic block or my stamping platform. And I'm also just going to check to see whether I need to double stamp it if I'm going to use my acrylic block. Sometimes it is a good idea just to practice your stamping before you go straight down onto your project. It might mean that it doesn't come out the way you want it to, or you don't want to use that particular ink pad. So yeah, it depends on what you're doing. It might be a good idea just to sort of have a practice to begin with. So in the magazine, under the sort of supplies that they've used for the cards, they have actually used these Prism World of Colour ink pads. So these are the ones that I've got. And all I'm going to do is just check the colours, and I'm going to pull up those same green ink pads that they've used in the magazine, because obviously they work really well together and they do sort of give you that really nice tropical theme. So I'm going to use 4 of the ink pads. So we've got Rainforest Green, we've got Evergreen, we've got Apple Green, and I believe the 4th one is Olive Green. So now I've got all of the ink pad colours that I want to use. I'm going to create just a masked section where I'm going to stamp this leaf design into. So I'm just going to take some purple tape. So this is tape that I've already used. So obviously this is reusable tape, and I do like to sort of keep it and try and get sort of as much use out of it as possible before I pop it in the bin. So all I've done is just lined up my purple tape with the grids on my mat just so I know that it is straight. And now this middle section is going to be the area where I'm going to create my stamped banner, and I'm going to leave the rest of the card nice and white. So all I'm going to do now is just take my stamp and using all 4 of these green shades, I'm just going to fill in this area and sort of build it up to give us a really nice sort of background strip to our card. So what's nice about using sort of just different shades of green is it all goes with that tropical theme. They'll all go really nicely together, and I think it'll just sort of give it a really nice kind of built up effect by using sort of different gradients of colours. So to begin with, I am looking at double stamping my image, but after sort of doing this one, I decided not to bother double stamping them anymore. I think they looked fine just as they were. And then I am going to go over the background with some regular green ink just to kind of fill in that detail a little bit more, so I'm not too worried about it. I do really love creating these little sort of background strips on my card. It's perfect if you have got sort of smaller stamps that you want to use to create a background, because it allows you just to kind of concentrate it in that one area. And yeah, I think they can look really effective, and it gives it a little bit more of a modern look because you're keeping the rest of the card relatively sort of clean and simple, and you've just got that real nice pop of colour within that strip. So you can see here, I'm just changing the directions of the stamps and I'm sort of mixing up the colours. Like I said, I don't want anything too uniform or too perfect. I want it to be kind of as random as possible. And it's really quick and easy because of the size of this particular stamp as well. It sort of comes together really quick. So once I've stamped all of my leaf images, what I'm going to do is just heat set it just a little bit because I'm just going to go in with a blending brush. So I've not put any ink on this actual brush. I'm just using the ink that sort of sat within the bristles, and I'm just going to kind of fill in the background. So I thought having the sort of white showing through behind the leaves looked a little bit too stark white, especially because we've got obviously the rest of the card is just going to stay white. So I'm just going to kind of go ahead and just really lightly brush that ink over the top of it, and it'll kind of just finish sort of the background off nicely. So again, I didn't want it to be sort of too uniform. I wanted it to be a little bit more sort of packed together. So I do go ahead and stamp a couple of more sort of in the gaps in between because I want it to be a really nice full background. So you'll be able to see just by filling in, like I said, those extra little gaps, it just gives us a much fuller background. And again, we've mixed those colours up nicely. So now that we've finished this strip background, we can go ahead and peel off our purple tape and sort of reveal our strip behind. This is always my favourite bit because I like to see if I've got that really nice crisp line that I want to get. It's always the most satisfying part when I'm creating sort of backgrounds like this. So what you could do if you wanted to, you could use like a thin black liner and sort of line that border just to make it stand out a little bit more. But I really love this. I think you can dress this up really nicely, make it a little bit more interesting, which is what we're going to do. But just even putting a sentiment on that is a really clean and simple and really quick card that you can put together. So what we're going to do now is just add some flowers and some leaves to our card. So all we're going to do is take this hibiscus stamp and I'm going to stamp this out just again onto some plain white cardstock, and I'm going to have 4 of these flowers, and I think I stamp about 6 of the leaves, and I'm going to create 2 sort of bunches of 3 flowers, and again we just sort of fill in some of that area just to give it a little bit more interest. So again, usually I do use my stamping platform. I'm just trying to use my acrylic blocks a little bit more, just to sort of obviously practice with it. And you know, I don't always necessarily need to get out my big stamping platform. So all we're going to do is colour these in using some alcohol markers. So I'm just using this Finesse stamp ink pad by Spectrum Noir. So this is the black and this is the alcohol proof dye. Obviously you want to make sure that you use the correct ink pad depending on what medium you are going to be colouring with. So I'll be using my tri-blend markers to colour these hibiscuses in and the leaves. And we're just again going to do some really basic colouring, just nice and bright again to go with this sort of tropical theme. So one thing I will mention, obviously, like I said, I do use my stamping platform for everything. The only thing that I would say with these stamps, the issue that I do have, the reason why I use my stamping platform all the time, is because I don't find you can get a crisp enough image with that sort of first stamp. I didn't think these were too bad. I probably would have stamped them twice if I'd used my stamping platform, but in actual fact, I was pretty happy with sort of how they came out. So again, I think I should just sort of not always reach for my stamping platform. Like I said, it's quite big. It can be quite bulky to use, and just try and use my acrylic blocks just a little bit more. So now we're happy with our stamping, I'm going to go ahead and start colouring. Like I said, I'm using my tri-blend markers because I just want to do some really basic colouring. So the colours that I decided to go for the flowers themselves, I'm going to do an orange, I've got a red and a yellow. And then I also picked sort of a really nice purple colour. And then I've gone with my green, and I've also gone in with a darker green as well, just because I wanted to get a little variation on the actual leaves themselves. I really love using these pens. I think they give you such an easy blend, and it just makes it super easy just to sort of colour in anything really. I've got a couple of sets of different alcohol markers, but definitely these tri-blends are the ones that I reach for most of all. So I'm just going to sort of fast forward after all the colouring. Obviously there's plenty of other videos sort of showing you how to colour and things, so we're just going to sort of skip past this little bit. There will be a little time-lapse video of me colouring these images in over on my Instagram page, so if you want to go and check that out, obviously you can see that there. But now for this, we have finished all of our colouring. Like I said, just some basic colouring, and we're going to use these coordinating dies to cut these out. So I could pop this into my scan and cut machine and it would cut out really nicely, but I am just going to use the coordinating dies that came with it. So they're super easy just to line up, and then we're just going to repeat the process, popping it through our die cutting machine to cut all of these images out. Okay, so we've got all of our dies cut out now, you can see them at the top, and we're just going to sort of think about how we're going to arrange them before we actually stick them down. So I'm not sure if I said previously that I was going to do 2 clusters of 3, but I'm doing 2 clusters of 2 because I only coloured in 4 flowers. So we're just going to arrange these just along sort of the border, and I don't want them to kind of mirror each other, so I'm just trying to place them so both sets look different, they're in different positions. And then we can just obviously slot some flowers in as and where we want. So I'm just going to use some liquid glue for the ones that are going to sit behind, and then the ones in front we're just going to pop a foam pad just to sort of lift it and give it a little bit of dimension. So you could sort of shape these a little bit if you wanted to. The cardstock I used is a little bit heavier, so obviously they don't sort of bend as well, but I'm not really too sort of worried about that. Like I said, I'm going to put them on these foam pads so that sort of lift it and give it a little bit of dimension. So the benefit of using obviously the liquid glue is that that's got a little bit of wiggle room, and then for those bottom ones we'll be able to just pop those leaves in behind them. So I really love the design of this, obviously putting them on the border. I don't want to cover up too much of the sort of background strip that we've created, but this does just kind of finish it off nicely. It kind of grinds it onto the card a little bit more, ready for us then to pop a sentiment on the card. So now the last thing to do on our card is to pop a sentiment on it. So I did white heat emboss this hello sentiment. I thought that looked really nice. I thought it was going to make a really fantastic sentiment for this card. I thought it looked a little bit chunky, so I went around the corners, but the corner punch I used was too big, and then I ended up basically just cutting the end of the hello off. I couldn't get it to look right, so I ended up not using it, and then I went for one of the other sentiments. So you can see here, I just keep cutting and I just make the whole thing worse and worse. So you can see here, I used the sentiment Let's Celebrate. So I did use one of the smaller ones, and I think actually it looks a lot nicer. It's not as big and it doesn't sort of cover as much as the background up. I did the exact same thing, did a little bit of white heat embossing on this black cardstock just to make it stand out. And I'm just going to pop this onto some small foam pads just to kind of lift it up again from the card so it doesn't sort of get lost behind all that sort of busy colour. And then really that's all that we're going to do for this card. I really loved sort of that clean, simple look, but there is a lot going on. There is sort of a lot of detail, a lot of colour in here, but I think it works together really brilliantly. And I think this stamp set is really perfect for any sort of, you know, summer birthdays maybe, or, you know, sort of if anyone's having any birthday parties, things like that. I think it sort of works really nicely. All I've done is just stick it to a 7x5 inch card base, so I have chopped it down a little bit just to give that nice sort of like white on white border. But again, really love how this came out. I think it looks really fantastic. So let's move on to our second card using this Totally Tropical stamp set and embossing folder. So for the next card, I'm going to use the embossing folder, and we're going to create a really nice background with it. So I'm just going to create my own sort of watercolour background before we pop it through the embossing folder. So I've just got here some 300 GSM watercolour cardstock. So I've cut this down. It's a little bit smaller than 7x5 because I'll be cutting it down again. And all we're going to do is just create a nice sort of green background that's going to go again with this tropical theme. And it's just going to be a really quick and simple background. So first thing I'm going to do is just sort of wet my paper to begin with, and then we're going to be using the light and dark green colour, and then we're just going to mix in sort of a little bit of yellow just to kind of give it sort of different shades of green and sort of really build up sort of that depth of colour for the background. So I'm really not going for anything perfect here, so I'm just literally getting the colour down on the cardstock. Because we're going to be putting it through the embossing folder, obviously you will be able to see the colour behind it, but you'll be more looking at sort of the embossed pattern rather than sort of what we're doing with the background. So like I said, I'm just sort of putting that colour down. I'm just creating these really nice stripes. The brush I'm using is a little bit wider, which means that I can sort of put these stripes down really easily. And you can see there we're just using a little bit of yellow. I've mixed to make a lighter green, so I've mixed the light green and the yellow to make it lighter again, and obviously used that dark green as well. And just sort of in between a couple of the layers, I've just used my heat tool just to dry it off a little bit, and again that'll allow you to put sort of another layer of colour on top of it without it kind of mixing together too much. So once I've finished creating this background, I'm going to dry it really well with my heat tool. So obviously then we're going to want to put it into our embossing folder, and I don't want to put it in there while it's sort of still wet. So once I've got it in the embossing folder, all I'm going to do is just run that through my die cutting machine. So you can see this pattern has come through really nicely. I think the background works really well with this because it does just sort of allow you to kind of see those colours that are in that background, but also then to see obviously the design of the embossing folder. So I think this will make a really fantastic background. So I've stuck my background onto my blank card base first of all. So the reason I've done this is because I want to make sure that I get it really nicely stuck down. Because it's embossed, I just want to make sure that it's sort of stuck down really well rather than trying to stick it down when I've got sort of everything assembled on top of it. So you can see here I've already stamped and coloured in the flamingo, and I just popped it onto this little card panel that's going to go onto the centre of our card. So you can see just some really simple colouring again with my tri-blend markers, and I've sort of done that shadow underneath it just to anchor it down onto that piece of cardstock. So next thing I'm going to do again is take that big sort of leaf stamp, and I'm just going to stamp them, and I'm just going to sort of fussy cut them out. So what I'm going to do is, again, using the same colours I did in the first card, I'm just going to ink these up, but I'm actually going to heat emboss them as well. So I'm just going to pop it into some clear embossing powder, and this will just give it sort of a really nice little shine. I really love having clear embossing powder because you can literally stamp with any coloured ink and then you can heat emboss on top of it. So yes, you can obviously get all the different coloured embossing powders, but if you just get a clear embossing powder, you can obviously make any colour embossing powder. All you need is just a coloured ink pad. So all I'm going to do is heat set this now. So I've already sort of stamped, heat embossed and fussy cut a bunch of these out. So I'm just showing you this just to show you what I've actually done. So I'm not very good at fussy cutting at all. I will either use my scan and cut machine or I will use a coordinating die. I do wish there was a die that went with this particular one, but like I said, I fussy cut it and it wasn't a particularly difficult shape to kind of cut around. So I've got a bunch of these in the 4 different shades that we used on the previous cards, again keeping in with that green tropical theme. And all I'm going to do is just sort of group these around 2 of the opposite corners. So to make sure I get my placement perfect, I'm just going to adhere down my flamingo panel first, and I'm just going to kind of shape these just a little bit just in my fingers, just to give it a little bit more shape and dimension. So I'm going to arrange these, so I'm going to do 2 sets of 3, and I'm going to arrange these on the opposite corners. So not only is this going to sort of decorate the card a little bit, but it's going to sort of fill in some of those sort of blank sections from our flamingo panel. So like I said, I'm just going to use different shades of green for these. So I'm not going to sort of match them together. I'm just kind of shaping them a little bit again, just to sort of give it a little bit more dimension. And then on top of these, we're going to pop a sentiment onto them just to kind of fill in that sort of middle bit, and again, just finish off our card. So I'm just going to use some wet glue just to adhere these down, so it gives me a little bit more wiggle room just to sort of make sure I get the placement exactly how I want it to be. But I will be putting my sentiments onto a foam pad, so that will just sort of lift that up a little bit. So I'm going to be putting 2 sentiments on here. So one, it'll go across each of the centre of these sort of clusters of leaves. So instead of doing sort of black with white heat embossing, I'm actually going to stamp onto some pink cardstock, because I think that'll go really nicely with the flamingo, again with that sort of tropical theme, and it sort of give it a little bit more interest, a little bit more colour. So I do 2 sets of sentiments, 2 sets of heat embossing. So again, like the first one of my stamped images didn't quite go too well. So I end up using 2 of the smaller sentiments, which is let's celebrate on your birthday. So for these sentiments, I am using my stamping platform. Because I'm stamping in black, I want to make sure I get a really nice crisp image. So these are the sentiments that I stamped out first, but I really thought that for you was just too big. It sort of really covered up the leaves. I think it would be fine if you're just stamping it onto your sort of cardstock generally, but I think to go just sort of in the centre, I think it was just a little bit too big. But you can see by using the other sort of smaller sentiments, this is let's celebrate. It's sort of roughly the same size as the on your birthday stamp. And I just think it sort of balances out the card a lot better. In terms of the space that we're putting it into, I think it fits a lot better in there. Like I said, I just think that for you was just a little bit too big to go in for this particular design. So I have just put these sentiments just on some foam pads, and that will just sort of lift it off the card a little bit again, a little bit of dimension. And I think it sort of covers up that sort of middle section where all the leaves are overlaying sort of really well. And again, just sort of finishes it off nicely. So I was going to leave that as our finished design, but I felt like that white behind the flamingo was just sort of missing something. I think it was just a little bit too plain. So I decided just to put some sort of clear drops on it. So these are sort of liquid drops, but they will dry hard. And I think this just kind of finished it off nicely. I've got a couple of these, but I don't tend to use them very often. But they are sort of great for filling in any sort of spaces that you have got on your cards or on your projects. So again, just sort of going around this flamingo, just on the background, just kind of randomly popping these dots on. And again, I think it just sort of finishes that card off really nicely. So I have overall really enjoyed using this stamp set and embossing folder. Again, not probably something I would sort of traditionally buy myself, but I always think it's really nice to sort of get stamp sets and embossing folders like this, because it means you've got something for sort of every occasion. So I know when the next issue of Creative Stamping comes out, they've also got a sort of tropical theme set, and sort of throughout the magazine I have seen it sort of advertising the fact that they will work really well together. So I am sort of looking forward to seeing how we can sort of incorporate both of those together. But I'll definitely be making a couple more cards using this particular set, just to see sort of how far we can sort of go with it, and see what it is that we can create. So that's it for today's video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope I've given you just a little bit of inspiration on what you can do using this stamp set and embossing folder. So just to remind you, this is the Simply Cards and Papercraft magazine, and this is issue 205, and the set is called Totally Tropical. So I will be uploading a few more videos where I'll be using these products again and showing you what else you can create. And I'll also be sort of combining some projects with this stamp set and the set that comes with the Creative Stamping magazine as well. So if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do so and hit that bell button so you don't miss out on any of those videos that get uploaded. If you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. And like I said, if you haven't subscribed, then please do so. Thanks very much for watching, and happy crafting!